Well, my name is Andrew Hoffman. I'm sitting here with John Barse, co-founder and board president of NeighborLink Fort Wayne. We thought it would be a really great opportunity to sit down and talk about NeighborLink, what NeighborLink even is, and give you a behind-the-scenes kind of view of some of the conversations John and I have had over the last 10 or 12 years about NeighborLink, our work, and really why we think it's different or unique, or what's happening through NeighborLink. So, John, for those that aren't familiar with NeighborLink, give us, as one of the founders of this organization, kind of the snapshot of what NeighborLink is and what it was intended to be.
Sure, thanks. So NeighborLink, we realize there are people all over our city who are falling through all kinds of cracks. They may be on some type of social support, governmental support, and that meets some but not necessarily all their needs. Others are folks that would never apply for a program like that. They're just in need. They've had something happen that, if not addressed, is going to move them out of their house, make them dependent on government programs or other things like that, and they don't want that. They would like to remain independent. And so those folks are all around us. They're in our neighborhoods. Some of them are actually related to us. And we wanted to find a way to identify those folks if they were willing to come forward and say, hey, I've got this need, and I trust you enough to establish rapport with me and come in and actually service the need that I have so that I can stay in my house. I won't incur some, excessive financial obligation that I can't really afford to pay. And so we developed, a way for them to be found, so to speak, and then a platform in which people could, who are saying, we're in churches, we want to go bring our good news and the way of living that we're learning about Jesus, who we follow. We want to bring that to this person in need and show them the love of God that has been shown to us, but we want to kind of refract that and give that away. And so the platform really was a web-based platform to connect those people in need with people who were trying to find things to do to serve them and serve God in the same. And so NeighborLink was born, and we hired a web designer to put the initial site together, and the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, so give us a bit of the timeline. Like when did this idea really come to fruition, and kind of maybe some of the genesis. How did this start? Was this a church program, an initiative? Did it start with a small group of people?
Yeah, it did. It started with actually a small group of people that attended a church on the east side of town, Black Hawk Ministries, and we were in charge of the outreach for the church at the time. And we were studying a pastor down in Cincinnati by the name of Steve Sjogren. And he was a pioneer with an idea called servant evangelism. And Steve had basically gone out and gotten his church convinced that if we were going to show the love of God in practical ways, we needed to go out into the neighborhoods around the church and give them things that they're going to use in ordinary life. Nothing real special, but newspapers, light bulbs, toilet paper, things that they would use in the course of any ordinary day. And as a point of connection, they would put a card in there identifying, we're with this church, which is the Vineyard Church in Loveland, Ohio. Come visit us. Here's a little map. Here's our website. And people would come and they would hear the message of the good news of Christ and what he has done for them, and invite them in the same kind of work, going back out into the neighborhood every Saturday and doing these acts of kindness that show God's love in a practical way. So we had gone down in 2000 to a conference just to kind of see what they were doing. Loved it. Came back, it really felt like the right direction. So we started having service days, big serves on Saturdays, every third Saturday of the month. And we were calling families to come out, small groups to come out and actually grab newspapers, toilet paper, and we supplied all their needs in these connection cards and sent them to different intersections and high traffic areas around Fort Wayne. And they did. They went out and gave away rolls of toilet paper, light bulbs, and things like that. And again, invited people to come to the church, a little map, told them that this is a small act of kindness to show God's love in a practical way. But we were trying to have a neighborhood connection with the church at large and kind of work the neighborhoods on the east side of Fort Wayne.
At what point did the group decide, the small group that was serving and engaging and doing something as a small community, at what point for you or for that community did you sense that there was something bigger here than just a small group going and serving?
Yeah, absolutely. So that got a lot of momentum. So what started with, a family or two and a small group and even some kids involved was growing to 120, 130 folks coming to this thing on the third Saturday of the month. And it was getting a lot of momentum, and people were enjoying because there was an outlet finally for something they knew they needed to be doing and trying to reach out in the community. So it really solved that dilemma, and people are finding that to be very fulfilling. But at the same time, we're having conversations now with some of the people who were taking our free stuff, and a lot of them were hesitant to take things that we knew they were using every day. So they wouldn't take the light bulb that they might be walking in the store to even buy that day. And we started asking a few of them, look, we just want to know, why are you hesitant? What's the reason why you wouldn't take something that we know you're going to go buy? And they said invariably, because we think there's a hook in this. We think behind the light bulb, there's some conversation you really want to have, and it's one that I don't want to hear necessarily, and it's going to take a bunch of time, and it's inconvenient. And if it's really easier not to take your light bulb, I'll just go in and buy one.
Yeah.
And that was a great insight, because it made us come back and say, this kind of stuff never happened with Jesus. When we look at the Gospels, it's very clear that Jesus had 100% assent to everything he ever did, to anyone he ever served. And the thing we had missed, as much as we want to get out in the neighborhoods and serve those folks and introduce them to the message of the gospel, is that we weren't meeting their felt needs. We had not asked, what do you really need? And the whole population we were actually sent to go reach, we were not going to connect with giving away the free stuff. As much as it was positive and it got our church out the door and out of the pew, if you will, it wasn't connecting to people in need. And so we had to come back and reinvent what we were doing on these big serves and really assess, are we meeting needs? And if Christ were here trying to set this up and he's got the church here mobilized, what would he have us do? And so the web idea was one that we had come up with a few years earlier, and thought, if we actually identified people and said, you tell us your needs, and we'll leave it to the coaches and people who want to serve to figure out, well, I'll be happy to take that, or I happen to have that skill set, I can meet that need. And I don't have to have control over that, I don't have to set that up. The web will actually help us administrate meeting the homeowner's need and keep essentially a low bar to entry on people. If you can access the computer and you're looking for something to do, here's a whole host of things, a whole list of things of people who need things done to help them, and they're in need, and they've said, help us. Yeah. So invariably, when you go service that population, I've yet to run into somebody who said, no, not here.
Yeah.
We don't want what you're offering by way of service. So it helps solve the dilemma of actually meeting people's needs that we weren't tapping before.
Yeah. So the idea really was birthed in 2000 with a small group of people, really just trying to live out the practical side of faith and development. Do that for a number of years, and the idea of really leveraging technology and using a web platform, essentially like an online bulletin board, really came to fruition. And you recognize that this really needed to be its own entity in order for collaboration among churches, for the legitimacy from other social service agencies. And so in 2003, really at the early age of technology and internet use and widespread, you guys had this vision to create this online bulletin board. Nearing almost 20 years of this idea practically being worked out in Fort Wayne, how do you see today's work at NeighborLink as it relates to maybe 15, 20 years ago?
Yeah, great question. It is dead on target on what it was intended to do. In fact, a couple times I've gone back because there was a summary paper put together about what NeighborLink could be, what it should look like, what some of the facets of that were. And from time to time I'll pull that out and just true it up with what I see us actually doing. And it's right on line with some of the core values we outlined in that. There was a lot of demand for people in need to have some other outlet besides social services, and there was a lot of people sitting in pews inside the church wondering, what am I here for? And so this was really a great way to test, how much capacity is there really in the Church of Fort Wayne to serve the people in need in our community. And what we're finding out is there's a lot more than what we thought. But obviously you see, if you go year by year, and gauge the number of projects that are posted on the site, that certainly helps us gauge the need. And we would see 25 projects or 40 projects or 50 projects in a couple months and think that, wow, there's a lot of need out there. And now you're seeing, as well over 1,000 projects posted in a year, each an individual person with an individual need that they can't get met and how they go about their lives. And then you've got, over 800 projects at this point, pushing 900. There's probably more than that, right? But you've got so much answer from the church community and even businesses that have faith-based folks trying to solve the same problem. And so there's way more demand. My guess is we're onto it now, and there's probably a lot more out there.
Yeah.
But at least the platform is becoming familiar. People are using it. The other thing is the social service agencies, who are really the eyes and ears of the needy in our community. I mean, they go in with a particular mission like food, and they'll say, by the way, we see all kinds of things wrong in this place that are dangerous, or this person doesn't have a sustainable residence. And they communicate those needs to us as well. So what we found is there's a whole nother group of people who are really the eyes and ears of the poor and needy in our community, who use us as a resource to meet the same people's needs. So that's been a huge thing that we learned along the way that identified some great partners for us.
Yeah. Well, I remember back, really in 2005 when I first started getting involved, I started off as a volunteer through Fellowship Missionary, through our church, showing up, mowing grass, to then being asked to lead projects, and then really being asked and invited into taking over the ownership of a larger community and mobilizing 50 to a couple hundred volunteers a month over the course of a couple of years. And I remember back in 2005, 2006 when I was getting involved, just how forward thinking that the platform really was, that there's this technology, that there's this bulletin board. And I personally am making a decision. I know I want to volunteer and I want to serve and I have that gifting or I have that desire. And once you understood the concept, or at least once I understood the concept of NeighborLink, I couldn't imagine another or better way to really volunteer, because I'm making the decision. And the more that you can control your service or your volunteerism, the more likely you're going to fulfill kind of the goals that you set out. We've learned, or at least I've learned over the years, that volunteerism is so much about personal, spiritual, professional development, that if I'm making that choice, it's because I want to learn something, or I'm feeling this need to develop or to serve or to engage. And I've always been, even as the director for the past 10 years, still really blown away that NeighborLink even exists or works. Mm-hmm. The idea of individuals looking for opportunities, mobilizing themselves, taking on all of the work, essentially, of identifying a project, working with a homeowner, finding the resources, finding the materials, giving up their time. Those are large barriers for people, even with the best intentions, to overcome on a regular basis. And everything in the culture, our day-to-day culture, says it shouldn't work, but it does. I'm curious your take, why does it work? Why is NeighborLink different?
That's a really good question. Because we were made to do that. We were actually designed to do this work. Our Maker made us in His image, and we bear it best when we're in this work. So that's why it's unusually gratifying. So if you go serve yourself or do things for yourself, you'll find that's not very satisfying or gratifying after a while. But if you serve somebody else and you know they have no capacity whatsoever to repay you, it is really going to be just an act of grace. You'll find that to be one of the most gratifying, rewarding, and it brings people back because there's so little of it to compete with that. Because the culture right now, the dominant culture, is feeding me, my needs, what I want to do, and my entertainment. And this is saying, no, it's actually you're wired and designed by your Maker for something completely better than that. And so it feeds that, and everybody who tries it, you never hear people walk away saying, I hated that experience. Yeah. You hear people every time saying that, I got so much more out of that than the beneficiary, than the client, by the recipient. This was so much better for me, for my family. We all walked away being touched by that. And that's because you're wired, you're made to your core to do this work.
Yeah. some of my favorite activities in the last couple of years at NeighborLink, and some of my favorite expressions of NeighborLink's mission is when a group of individuals that have little or no faith background come and serve and engage because they know it's the right thing to do. They understand the golden rule. They understand internally that they are made to be generous and to give. And to see them connect to that spirit within themselves and really experience what you just described, but not really know necessarily where that's coming from.
Yeah.
But they often show up and engage at a level that is really significant, not only for them but the recipient, and they get a glimpse that being connected with our neighbors, being connected with the vulnerable, and sharing of resources in really tangible, practical ways that are really insignificant to them, that they realize that I mow my grass every day. This is not that big of a give. But when they interact with a homeowner, it really connects deeply to them. And that's one of the things that just keeps me motivated at NeighborLink, and to see that, because I love how our mission helps people of all different backgrounds connect to really who God has created them to be.
Yes.
So John, you commented about the idea that 15 years past the launch of NeighborLink, that NeighborLink's still really running operationally as you intended or as you had vision for. And being around for 10 years, I would agree. I look back and NeighborLink is still functionally, operationally the same as it always was. This idea of leveraging technology to connect vulnerable homeowners falling through the cracks and local churches or neighbors to connect and really neighbor to neighbor, practical neighbor to neighbor expressions of God's love, this technology tool. But over the years, we keep investing more and more time and more resources, and we're trying to keep up with technology, and we keep building on it, really taking a development approach to our mission and operations. But I love the fact that at the end of the day, we're still the same entity. Because of some of those investments in technology and the progression of our mission, I see several things that are really unique about what we're doing and why I think it's still so relevant heading into 2018. With technology and social media and communication, I look at NeighborLink as really a communication platform that we've been gifted and stewarded and take the responsibility of collecting the needs of homeowners that have kind of reached the end of their voice.
Right.
Their community is fractured, they don't have it any longer. They've asked and done everything that they can and have been turned away or just can't have these needs met. And we're able to collect these projects, put them on this platform, and anybody that visits our website can see those projects. It has potential to connect to them. We collect over 2,000 projects a year locally in Fort Wayne, and have anywhere from 300 to 400 available projects at any given time.
Right.
And we have all of these volunteers, all these really good intentions, churches, businesses, civic groups, individuals that are really looking for opportunities, and they're looking for information. And it's really hard to mobilize sometimes. And so what we get to do is be able to communicate those needs and really be the connector. And that's even more relevant whether it's mobile technology, social media, email communication, but being a technological communication tool that's really bridging those two worlds is significant for our day and age. One of the things I'm not sure if you really recognize, but because of this technology and the way we're able to collect all of this data, since 2003, we've conservatively seen volunteers self-select, organize, and mobilize and complete almost 10,000 projects. As you think about that, when you were just in a small group in the early 2000s, taking on one project after another, how do you reflect on that reality?
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. That is an amazing, staggering number of projects, because there are 10,000 people, right, that had a need they, couldn't solve, couldn't meet, and they were already in a lot of difficulty anyway. And that means there's 10,000 plus people who cared enough to meet the need, show up, mow some grass, put a roof on, switch out something in their house. But I mean, that's an awesome amount of effort, and giving to people in need in Fort Wayne. So may I also say, Christ be praised for that. I mean, this is all about him getting us initiated by showing us how to do this and meeting needs and serving people in need and doing it with his character. So again, kudos to Jesus, right?
Yeah.
For showing us the way to do this and then inviting us into this work. The backside of that is, and I think we got to celebrate that. I mean, we got to talk about that and let people know they've done an amazing job in the 15 years this has happened. It has absolutely changed the face of the poor population, the marginalized population of our city, and we got to celebrate that. So I think that's something I hope anyone who serves or volunteers or gives hears that and feels very affirmed in what they've done and the choices they've made to meet needs. And celebrates with Jesus the good and just the light over that work. I mean, that has got to be celebrated. It's huge. I wonder how many are really out there. How many people are still out there in a place where they don't know the platform is there. They're not in a neighborhood where anybody's actually aware of them. They're not connected relationally to family members anymore. It makes me wonder, how big is that? Are we hitting 10% of what's really out there?
Well, we know each year, even of the completed projects, we're only getting to about 35% of the requests a year. This year, NeighborLink volunteers have selected over 900 projects just this year alone. And that's only about 40% of the requests that we know of. And we all know that there has to be at least double of that, if not triple of that in Fort Wayne of homeowners that if they knew about NeighborLink, they would ask for some sort of help. And because we're so inundated with numbers and metrics and the need of over 2,000 requests a year, one of the things that you've always done for me is constantly remind me that NeighborLink is all about relationships, and it's not about projects. That the projects are just a facilitator to the relationship.
Yes.
And that's been a driving philosophy, and what I think is really significantly different about NeighborLink from an operation and from a nonprofit perspective, when we're constantly being asked for metrics and numbers and measurements, and it's easy for us to gravitate to the numbers, but it's really hard to measure the depth of relationships and be able to provide that in results. Well, one of the things that we've really tried to do that helps that is really focusing on the stories of folks. Just this week, we were able to install 2 furnaces for a dialysis patient who is going 3 times a week, whose furnace has been out all year. Another woman named Annie who has had her furnace go out, and so we've installed 2 new furnaces, which is another illustration of just how different our platform is, because both of those projects are typically beyond the scope of volunteers, and we have to hire contractors. But what's really unique and really focused on relationship is our technology has allowed us to create our own fundraising platform. And now we have individuals not just showing up to do volunteerism, but they're giving up their birthdays, or they're incorporating it into their sports and inviting their community to share abundantly with our community. And I love seeing the crowdfunding. We'll raise nearly $30,000 through crowdfunding, individuals choosing to fundraise for other people. And so both of those furnaces were fundraised by other individuals that likely or may never even meet the person that they're benefacting, but they're connecting to that story.
That's amazing.
In a unique way.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So being involved with NeighborLink has really transformed my life, and I know it's really transformed your life. When you think about NeighborLink being a facilitator of transformation, kind of describe what kind of transformation you've seen, whether it's personal or in general in NeighborLink. Give us an idea of what transformation looks like in NeighborLink.
Yeah, great question. So, we went out initially and said, we've got all these projects to do and we're organizing teams, let's go do them. And the focus is just engagement. And so we would grab painting projects and head out with a team of people and go serve a homeowner who needed a room painted. And we would typically pray with them when we're done. And we'd always ask them, is there anything else besides, what's going on in your house? I mean, is there a family member, any health needs that you've got that we could pray for? We want to bring this in front of the one who kind of sent us into this work. And invariably they would start sharing, well, yeah, actually, I'm I've got eye surgery. I'm scared about it. I've never had a surgery like that before, so if you could pray for that. And we do try to, and we obviously pray for that, but then we'll follow up a lot of times saying, is there anything else you need? We noticed that the same kind of color you had in that room is actually in a couple others. Maybe you want us to come back and paint those bedrooms too. And so we were trying to have kind of repetition with the homeowner to, again, establish a relationship with them. And the thing that kind of God smacked us as we served is, I'm getting really connected to this person, and I see God at work in her, and I also see him talking to me, because I would be one that would be more tasky. I like to get things done. I like to check a box. I like to sign up. I do my assignment and I go to the website looking for something else. I'm really kind of done here. And Jesus is saying, no, I want you to go back, and I want you to go back, and I want you to go back. And as many needs as you find there, I want your team in there. It may take 2 years. That was a revelation for me, that we have more to do here than just fix people or fix things. We needed to connect with them, learn who they were, their struggles, bring them into my prayer life, and actually start to engage with them as people. So that was something. And I hear, if we actually get into conversation with people who have been serving for a while, asking them what's been the kind of 1-2 thing that you've learned about serving in NeighborLink, it is that this is changing me.
Yeah.
I mean, I just went into this kind of with an open hand, and we're going to serve and give away, but I find that I'm far more challenged in my journey with Jesus in terms of what I'm being called to do, and how I do it is radically different today than it was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
From the first conversation, there are things I'm doing today that I wasn't even thinking of 15 years ago.
Yeah, volunteers, if you spend any time talking to any volunteer that's been doing this for a while, the consensus is that NeighborLink, the participation through NeighborLink has done more transformation for my own life than we feel like we've made any impact in the community.
Right. So Andrew, you've been doing this, not just serving, which you did before you were even in the executive director position, but you've been doing that role for about 10 years now. Obviously, when you came on, I mean, my focus was kind of orphans and widows.
Yeah.
There's people in need, there's things that need to get done. We've got capacity, we've got tools, we've got know-how, we've got people who are licensed to do this. Let's bring all that to bear on our orphans and widows. And it was somewhat of a deluge of giving stuff away and giving away services. And as you evaluated that, and maybe about 2 or 3 years in, you began to see, that may not be the right thing for everybody.
Yeah.
Maybe you could describe a little bit of what you and I talked about when we talked about the idea of, is there a way that we can actually hurt a recipient by giving them, services or fixing things? And what did you see we really needed to change how we thought about the poor and vulnerable in our city?
Yeah, one of the things I love about NeighborLink and your philosophy that you always build in from the beginning, that I still hold on to today, is that at the end of the day, when decisions have to be made at NeighborLink, that we err on the side of grace. That's what we can do. Err on the side of giving more than what we thought we could give or should give, because that's what Christ really does for us. But practically, the more that we did this work, and the more the volunteers did this work, the more that we spent time with homeowners, we were recognizing that homeowners had more resources than they thought they had. They had more skills, they had more opportunity to really solve their own problem. And as volunteers went in, as I went in individually, the more that you go and you serve and you start building that relationship, and when you can identify that somebody has the ability to solve their own need, which is really the most sustainable way for an individual to progress in life. We're being invited in a crisis mode, which is always going to be temporary, no matter our desire for a relationship, unless the person's living next door to us, or it's a family member. But at the end of the day, our goal has really become to see the church step into people's issues relationally, and get past the old idea that service And evangelism is a transactional deal. That we shouldn't be on each side of a table negotiating. The homeowner that's asking, the neighbor in need that's asking for help is trying to negotiate with us, the volunteers, the resourced, in order to get their need met the best way that they think is possible. The volunteer shows up wanting to be able to meet the need with the least amount of investment, oftentimes, even if we're intentionally trying to be a neighbor. And so what we've learned over the years, and especially those first couple of years, is that we need to right-side this relationship. If it really is a relationship and we are neighbors, then we need to come along to the side of the table with them and say, these are the resources that we have today. What resources do you have? Or help them identify the resources that we see that they have, or at least be able to ask them. Because one of the things that we saw is when we just come in and we serve and we solve that problem, we have the potential to rob the dignity of the individual asking for help. Even if they want to just have their need met, chances are it's going to be a short-term solution to a long-term problem. That the short-term solution is that, and a lot of times mowing the grass or something is a short-term solution. But when we show up to a neighbor's house and there's 15, 16-year-old grandkids sitting on the couch that is able-bodied of grandma, and a team of volunteers shows up there really eager to help out, they've identified that grandson as a resource. And when they show up to do something that they feel like the resources are already there to do, those volunteers start to question. We all naturally start questioning, well, why am I here? And we, myself, the other volunteers, the more that we did that, we recognized that. And we really wanted to invite the resources that were at the table to be involved. That development really starts at the relationship, that our goal is to come alongside people for the time and to help maybe solve the short-term problem with a long-term gain. Like, how do we help fixed income individuals live independently? And if they've got resources like grandkids that can mow the grass, then maybe our best steward of the resources is to be able to find a lawnmower for that homeowner. Maybe they don't have a lawnmower, but we have to ask that question. Maybe the grandkid has always just been told that they don't have any skills or ability or know-how, that there's a relationship fracturing there, that this grandson would help. He's just been beat down a bit. And so we have to kind of step in and try to lovingly invite the grandkid out, show them how to do it, join us in the project. And a couple of things happen. Maybe that doesn't change the long term, but as volunteers, we're much more engaged. We have a better understanding of the story. And I think for a long time, we've not been given permission as the church, as volunteers, as resourced individuals, to ask questions. Service has always been, and volunteerism has been in this transaction. You show up at this time and you do what is being asked of you. You don't ask questions. But it's human nature to ask questions. You want to know more of the story. And the only way you can do that is to be able to ask questions. And that's the part of NeighborLink, this decentralized model that I really love. It gives volunteers permission. And we spend a lot of time as our staff working with new volunteer groups and say, whatever you're feeling or sensing on a project, ask it. Engage with that homeowner. If you see resources, ask it. And now, anytime somebody calls and asks for help, anytime a volunteer goes out to a project, one of the first questions we have, especially if the project requires resources, is, do you have anything to contribute to the project? It's not a requirement, but if you have 5, 10, 15, 20, or if you can contribute to the materials, or if you can have your family show up to help us, we want to know that information.
Yeah.
And it's actually going to increase the likelihood of your project getting selected, because this is a partnership.
Yeah. That's really good. One of the things that you described to me, maybe the first or second year into your position as executive director, and I've heard similar things from Jeff Chateau and even some of the coaches that have done a fair number of projects, is they've been doing this a while and they just feel like we're not able to do enough, and we're getting phone calls and we're getting messages from people who are leaving their 8th, 9th, 10th message, and these are getting somewhat desperate.
Yeah.
And there was almost a despair, in you and Jeff, that I think was probably right, that you've learned to deal with, knowing that's always out there. And that even though we can say we've done, 900 plus projects in the year, there's a whole bunch of people out here who are in very desperate circumstances. Maybe you could describe kind of how you manage knowing that that's out there, but also realizing there are things we can do right now.
Yeah.
And again, this is highly dependent on how people, take the projects. But maybe you could describe how you manage that conflict.
Yeah, carrying the weight of NeighborLink on a day-to-day basis is challenging. For every project we do, we get 4 or 5 phone calls. Anytime we feel like we get ahead and we do 2 or 3, 5 projects that are pretty significant, and we feel proud and we feel excited, we get phone call after phone call of need that's greater than the one we just accomplished. Mm-hmm. And when you're collecting thousands of phone calls a year and you act that on 5-10 years, it's very difficult to carry that weight, especially in those early years when you feel the responsibility to do something. When somebody's asking you for help and you know their situation and you know they're a neighbor and they look a lot like your grandma and they live in a perfectly good neighborhood and they're calling with things that you just know the likelihood of them getting done is so small. I know for me and for Jeff and our staff, there's this realization of what God is really calling us to do as an organization, as individuals. That he's calling us to steward and to listen and to really acknowledge, like he acknowledges us, that we have to let go of the responsibility of needing to be able to do every project. Mm-hmm. We just recognize we're just not going to. But one of the most significant things that we can do is take the phone call, take the email, talk to the homeowner, gather their information, to just listen to them.
Right.
Not ask them about requirements, not ask them about why they can't do that, but just hear them out. They're lamenting, they're dealing with crisis, they're dealing with a problem in their life that they've identified that they can't do.
Right.
And they just really want somebody to listen to them. And we feel really called as individuals to be that person to say, we hear you, we acknowledge it, we are going to do what we can to try to meet this need. We try to be clear on expectations, but in the back of our mind, we know that there's a maybe, because there are volunteers and there are churches responding on a day-to-day basis. The fact that we've done 900 projects this year, there is a chance, and we've seen projects. Now, this is the benefit of been doing this for 10 years. There isn't a project or a problem that can be addressed or hasn't been addressed in the past. We may only fix 10 roofs a year of the 200 plus requests we get, but they're getting done.
Right.
Somebody's stepping into that.
Right.
And that's been helpful. To right side what our responsibility is in this and what God's calling us to steward. And at the end of the day, God's going to choose, and he's going to help, and he's going to mobilize his people to respond to the needs that he's pushing and providing. And what we have to do is be obedient to collecting the needs and telling the stories.
Yeah.
So John, really NeighborLink has continued to grow significantly. We've tripled, quadrupled our capacity in the last couple of years. As we work to wrap this up, I'm curious, what do you see as the future of NeighborLink? Really, give us the take as a board president, as a co-founder, as a visionary for this organization. What do you see for NeighborLink's future?
Great question. Let me preface my response with kind of how I see the church relate to NeighborLink and NeighborLink relate to the church. And NeighborLink, like most nonprofits, it's not here to supplant the church. I mean, the church is the thing that Christ has left on earth, which is his body, to complete the mission that he started. And it and only it is going to do this and do it right. NeighborLink was done really to say we are here to support reduce the barriers to entering into the work of ministering to the least among us. And so there are lots of ministries like us, in terms of even in Allen County, but we want to actually help mobilize people who are in churches. And we also want to steer people who might be unchurched to love the vision, who actually feel this sense of gratification that comes when they're actually aligning what they do with God's image-bearing, created part of who they are. And we want to steer them into the local church. So, I want to make clear that, NeighborLink is trying to build the Church of Fort Wayne to be the full representation of who Christ wanted it to be, and an accurate representation of his body, especially as it comes to serving the least of these and serving one another. That being said, really important to me would be church engagement. How are we coming across, relating, and we're a city of churches, but we're also a city of silos. A lot of churches and a lot of nonprofits that are faith-based operate on the silo principle that we have to kind of own all the outcomes, and there's almost a scarcity of people. We are fighting about people, and I think we're a collaborating organization. We want to find churches that think more collaboratively about the Church of Fort Wayne, with all of our differences and the things that make us unique bodies of Christ. We want to make sure we come alongside and support those churches and make them stronger by helping them identify even people in their own neighborhoods who are vulnerable, and helping people in their congregations to actually meet the needs of those folks. What the church gets out of that is a better disciple. They get a better follower of Jesus, because that person is going to have to come to grips with who they are, and come to grips with the fact that we're blessed and other people are not as blessed. And by putting their hands, their resources to bear on a need, and having a relationship with that person and looking them in the eye and praying with them, it is going to develop them far better than some of the ways that we would traditionally do discipleship and actually trying to help them become more the image of Christ. So we want to further the church's work in making disciples for Jesus by helping people engage in NeighborLink. So church engagement is very high on my list of things that we want to be good about as we look forward. The other one is we got to keep mining. We got to keep finding people that are falling through the cracks that we haven't even found yet. I feel like we're doing a good job with a lot of the social services and the work's kind of out there that we're servicing, but I feel like we're missing a lot of people. And so, again, I think we got to keep mining the social service agencies and the other nonprofits, again, not for the people they're servicing to, but people they're meeting, because they have the eyes and ears and they're in the streets and they're finding them. We want to make sure we're doing a good job as we can do to identify everybody who's in need, so that we can bring the help that's out there.
I look at NeighborLink and kind of what I see for the future that we're working on. One of the core philosophies that's really been driving my focus and my leadership for a number of years is this idea that how do we eliminate the barriers between those in need and those helping, whether that's new tools, new resources. We want to remove all of the barriers between that. And as technology and people are getting busy, ultimately individuals want to be able to connect. There's a lot of individuals out there that want to help, churches, businesses that want to get engaged, and they want to do it with the quickest way possible. And so as we look at the practical side of NeighborLink and what we see for the future, investing even more into technology, working directly with businesses and churches, trying to develop really good strategies and pathways that allow individuals to connect directly to that homeowner need. We just know that volunteers, if somebody's making the decision to volunteer, we want to connect them directly and as quickly as possible in order to make that connection. Kind of get out of the way of their pathway. The sooner they can connect relationally with that homeowner, the quicker the transformation begins to happen, the quicker they start looking at their neighborhoods differently, and looking at our city differently, and looking at ways that they can be a direct impact. NeighborLink, it's never really about NeighborLink as an organization. We really feel like we're the connector, and we want to make as many connections as possible and get out of the way to allow those connections to grow, to thrive, to allow the relationship to build.
That's well said.
Well, John, thanks for your vision back in the 2000s. Thanks for creating this platform that allowed me to get involved, and really it's been a joy and really a privilege and a calling for me to be able to be a part of this organization for the last 10 years. I'm really excited about the fact that you're still as invested now as you ever have been. And it's fun to be on this journey with you, the rest of the board, and the rest of our staff as we really just try to live out what God's calling us to do.
Well, thank you. And I mean, again, God be praised. The whole idea, I mean, all we're doing is putting on a technological face on what Jesus is all about, what he was doing. And he came up with the whole idea and the character with which it was done. So as we, if we're successful with anything, perhaps we'll emulate better and better the work that Jesus started, and again, develop his character in us as we do it. So to him be all the praise, all the glory.
Yeah, and thank you, all the volunteers, the donors, the supporters for the last 14 years as we kind of end this year. Our goal tonight was, in this video, was really just to give you a snapshot into some of the conversations John and I are having on a regular basis and our passion for NeighborLink. And we invite you to engage with us, reach out to us through our website to learn more. We'd love to come talk to you, have coffee, meet with your church, or really help you connect to the neighbors near your home.
Thank you.